You've seen this watch before, you might even be wearing it. A black dial, a rotating bezel, a steel case, big, luminous markers. It could be a Rolex, it could be a Seiko, it could be a Tudor, or maybe even Omega. Or maybe it's something you picked up online for only £200. Either way, it could be any of the above. Somehow, the dive watch, this rugged, functional, underwater tool, has become one of the most recognisable and rigid templates in modern design. In a world overflowing with creativity, why does it feel like every dive watch is just a remix of the same one? This isn't just about watches, it is about how ideas survive and how tradition becomes an expectation. Today we're going deep into the history of the dive watch, the cultural forces that shaped it, and the strange truth at the heart of it all. Why all dive watches look the same and why they probably always will. And if that sounds good to you, do make sure to like and subscribe. The origins. The dive watch wasn't born in a boardroom. It wasn't designed for status. It was created to survive pressure, saltwater, darkness, and failure. Its origins go back further than most realise. In 1932, Omega released the Marine, a strange double-case contraption built not for style, but for function. It was one of the first watches that could be submerged and keep ticking. It was a prototype for an idea: time underwater. But the real beginning, the moment the dive watch became a genre, came 2 decades later in 1953. That year, 3 companies working in parallel shaped the template of the dive watch as we see it today. Blancpain launched the 50 Fathoms, built for French combat divers who needed a legible, reliable tool in the depths. It was bold, purpose-built, and revolutionary. Large bezel, black dial, luminous hands, and a screw-down crown. Design decisions dictated entirely by utility. Rolex followed closely with the Submariner, refining the same principles with typical Rolex restraint. It wasn't louder, just tougher, more elegant, and destined to become something else entirely. An icon not just within watches, but within popular culture. Zodiac's Seawolf completed the triad, less glamorous, more accessible, and the first truly mass-market dive watch. It proved that underwater functionality wasn't just for elites or soldiers, it was potentially for everyone. From there, the category exploded. Doxa introduced colour, famously with their orange dials for better visibility in murky water. Seiko delivered affordability and robustness with the 6105 and later the SKX line, earning cult status among both divers and collectors. These weren't fashion statements, they were tools that took beatings, survived real dives, and came back for more every single time. And as diving itself became more widespread, militarised, recreational, commercial, the watch evolved to meet the demands. Depth ratings increased, cases got thicker, crystals became domed and hardened, bezel clicks got sharper. Eventually, the ISO 6425 standard would codify what a dive watch was supposed to be and what it wasn't. And in all of this, across oceans, militaries, and manufacturers, a silhouette emerged, not by intention, but by convergence. This is where design stopped being creative and started becoming canonical. The formula. Fast forward 70 years, the dive watch is everywhere, and yet it hasn't changed. You'll find them at the bottom of the ocean and behind the desk, on the risk of those in the special forces, celebrity chefs, those in property, and of course those in fashion. But whether it costs $5,000 or $500, the shape remains eerily similar. Take a look at the usual suspects. The Rolex Submariner, still the king and still relatively unchanged since 1953 to the untrained eye. The Omega Seamaster 300, its Cold War rival turned Bond accessory. The Tudor Black Bay, a modern classic that's basically a greatest hits album of vintage Rolex. Even the outliers like Doxa with their iconic cushion cases and orange dials still feel loyal to the genre. The Seiko SKX 007, discontinued but now immortal, may be the most honest dive watch of the last 30 years. It wasn't trying to be cool, just good. Then there are the homages. Steinhardt, San Martin, Invicta, dozens, maybe hundreds of microbrands that remix and repackage the Submariner template with just enough variation to call it their own. And people buy them in droves. The irony, most of these watches are never worn in water deeper than a sink. They're not dive tools anymore, they're style icons or symbols of aspiration. The dive watch has become the uniform of rugged respectability, a message that you're not one to rock the boat, but if you did, your watch would be alright when you fell in the water. But for all this abundance, the category is visually stagnant. Bold fonts, subtle fonts, applied markers or printed ones. red text or gills. These are tweaks, they are not transformations, and they are never radical. And it's not because all dive watches look the same, it's that we want them to. The silhouette has become sacred, an icon more important than the function the watch was born to serve. Rulebreakers. But not everyone plays by the rules. A few brands have looked at this sacred silhouette of the dive watch and asked a serious question. What if we don't do it that way? Take Doxa for example. While everyone else followed Rolex's formula, Doxa went left. A barrel-shaped case, oversized minute hand, and most radical of all, that orange dial. Not for style, but for visibility. It's weird, it's functional, but it works. We can also look at Unimatic, straight out of Italy. Their diver looks brutalist, almost abstract, minimal to the point of anonymity. No flashy colours, just shape, lume, and presence. Then there's Ming. Their 1801 H41 looks like it landed from a better designed future. No crown guards. A dial built like a lunar crater. It still follows the dive watch spec sheet, but it doesn't look like anything else. Resonance goes even further. Their oil-filled Type 5 has no hands, no crown, and no bezel, just rotating orbital discs under a liquid dome. Legible at any angle. It is not just different, it's alien to everything we've seen before. And if you want pure rebellion, MB&F's horological machine number 7 is a dive watch in the same way that a sculpture is a seat. Technically, it qualifies, but it looks like a mechanical sea creature, all fins and domes and glowing tentacles of lume. All of these watches challenge the rules. They rethink what a dive watch can look like, how it can function, even what it means. But here's the catch. None of them have changed the industry. They win awards, they spark comment threads, they sell in small numbers. But they'd never move the mainstream designs forward. The mainstream silhouette of the dive watch remains untouched. Because the moment a dive watch stops looking like a dive watch, it stops being one, at least in the eyes of the market. This is the paradox of innovation in watch design. The more radical it gets, the more niche it becomes. If it doesn't echo the Submariner, if it doesn't feel familiar, people will hesitate and they won't buy it. Design, after all, doesn't just tell us what something does, it tells us what it is. And for the dive watch, the identity is already locked in. Form follows function. At first glance, the dive watch seems obvious. It follows function. A rotating bezel to track dive time, a legible dial with large, luminous markers for low light visibility. Water resistance guaranteed by thick cases and screw-down crowns. In other words, form follows function. Or so the story goes. But look closer, and something deeper is happening. The dive watch is a product of what we might be able to call design Darwinism. Bad designs die out, and the ones that survive are those best adapted to their purpose. The Rolex Submariner, the archetype, becomes a genetic ancestor of nearly every dive watch because it hits a perfect balance. Its DNA lives on in countless watches that mimic its proportions, its dial layout, its bezel. These features aren't just practical, they have become canonical. But the dive watch isn't a functional tool anymore, it's a sign, a symbol. In semiotic terms, the dive watch communicates toughness, reliability, competence. Even if it's worn by a desk diver who's never touched the ocean, its design tells a story, one we understand without words. This is where the philosopher Jean Baudrillard helps us to see more clearly. He described how objects can become simulacra, simulations of reality that replace reality itself. The dive watch simulates danger, adventure, and survival. It doesn't need to perform underwater because it already performs the idea of readiness. Roland Barthes, in his work Mythologies, showed how objects carry cultural myths, and the dive watch carries many: masculinity, exploration, competence, and courage. We don't dive, but we want to feel like we could. We want to wear the myth of the dive watch, and that is why, after decades, so many dive watches look the same. Because they aren't just watches, they are icons, vessels of a myth we keep telling ourselves. Design conservatism. In dive watches, conservatism isn't just a design choice, it's a deliberate business strategy. Take Rolex for example. The evolution is famously slow, almost glacial. Decades pass between meaningful updates, and when they do arrive, they are only subtle refinements. A slightly slimmer case here, a change of bezel material there. Never a radical innovation. Omega treads a similar path. they mine their own past, reissuing vintage heritage models that echo legendary moments, watches that don't just measure time but tell stories of exploration and adventure beneath the waves or up in space. This isn't a failure of imagination, it's a recognition of what buyers want. Not disruption, but icons, objects that are instantly recognizable and thus instantly trusted. Dive watches today aren't tools designed for survival, they're heirlooms, symbols of emotional permanence, objects meant to be passed down and treasured for generations. Here, Walter Benjamin's concept of aura offers a powerful insight. With mass production, most objects lose their unique presence, their authenticity, but the dive watch preserves its aura through its history, its myth, and its carefully preserved design language. The scratches on a Submariner aren't flaws, they're evidence of a life lived. The familiar silhouette carries stories we don't need to hear to understand. This aura transforms the watch from a mere object into something revered, a talisman of identity, heritage, and even aspiration. To radically change the dive watch, to redesign its shape or abandon its visual vocabulary is to break that spell. It risks destroying the very thing that makes the watch valuable. Its connection to a myth, to a tradition, to a shared cultural memory. And so, watchmakers don't just avoid revolution, they embrace continuity, because in the luxury watch world, nostalgia isn't a relic of the past, it's a vital business model. Social media. With social media, the dive watch landscape seems more diverse than ever. Thousands of micro brands have emerged, each promising fresh designs and unique perspectives. At first glance, this explosion of new players looks like a creative renaissance, a flourishing of innovation and variety. But look closer, and a different pattern emerges. Despite the sheer number of brands, most dive watches look strikingly similar. Why? Because online platforms, especially Instagram and YouTube, reward familiarity. Algorithms prioritize images that perform well, watches that fit the existing visual language that echoes the canonical dive watch silhouette, that don't stray too far from what's already proven. For these microbrands, playing it safe isn't just a design choice, it is ultimately a survival strategy. They design watches that fit neatly into the visual norms dictated by the market and the platform's feedback loops. The tastemakers of this era often reinforce these norms, consciously or unconsciously perpetuating the aesthetic status quo. They celebrate designs that resonate, that look right, that conform, and those voices carry enormous weight among enthusiasts and buyers. But they're also compelled to produce the content with these watches in because they perform, because they're known. So what feels like diversity is often just perceived diversity, a kaleidoscope of subtle variations around the same core design. A different type of hand here, a different type of dial there. Online, every dive watch looks the same because these systems, both human and not, filter for what already works. The Instagram dive watch, to return to Baudrillard, is a simulacrum of choice, not true innovation. And this digital echo chamber further cements the dive watch silhouette as the uncontested standard, the shape that refuses to change, even in an age of endless possibility. Progress. Behind the visual sameness of dive watches lies a less visible but equally powerful force: materials and manufacturing realities. Stainless steel has been the backbone of dive watch cases for decades. Its durability, corrosion resistance, and workability make it the ideal choice. But it also comes with inherent limitations in shape and finish. Ceramic bezels and sapphire crystals, now standard in quality dive watches, bring their own constraints. These materials demand precision and add complexity to manufacturing, pushing designs towards proven, reliable forms, not new innovations. Then there's ISO 6425, the international standard that certifies a watch as a true dive watch. It mandates water resistance of at least 100 meters, luminous markers for legibility in darkness, resistance to magnetic fields, shock, and saltwater corrosion. These requirements aren't just technical checkboxes, they shape design decisions. Case thickness, bezel function, dial clarity all must meet stringent criteria. This creates what we might call ISO inertia. The standard itself becomes a design boundary. To innovate beyond it risks losing certification, and with that, credibility. Good design in this context becomes hard to improve upon because the template is mature, perfected over decades through trial, error, and regulation. This is the paradox of design evolution. it doesn't progress indefinitely. Sometimes design ossifies, it becomes canon. The dive watch is a perfect example, where material science, manufacturing techniques, and industry standards converge to lock in a design that works so well it will always resist change, the future. As we look ahead, a question looms. Will the dive watch survive, or has it already become a relic, fossilised in time? Smartwatches and dedicated dive computers have eaten away at the tool watch market for decades now. Professional divers rely on digital instruments, not mechanical watches. Dive computers provide real-time data, enhanced safety, and intuitive functionality that no analog watch can ever match. These watches' time is gone, and they're unable to develop any new real meaning as a result. So what role remains for the mechanical dive watch? It's no longer a tool. Instead, it risks becoming pure style, a nostalgic accessory, a fashion fossil clinging to a past that no longer exists. Or perhaps more generously, it transforms into a ritualistic object, a talisman worn not for its function but to evoke identity, history, and aspiration. The dive watch could become, or perhaps already is, a symbol of permanence in a world of constant change, a wearable artifact of craftsmanship and tradition. The most likely future, the dive watch stays exactly the same forever, not because it cannot change, but because it doesn't need to. It has already achieved a kind of perfection, not just in design or function, but in meaning. The dive watch may never change again, and that might be exactly why people love it. So what do you think? Should the dive watch evolve, break free from its timeless silhouette, and embrace bold new shapes? Or is its unchanging design part of its magic? A symbol that connects us across generations, a story we want to keep wearing every day. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the history, design, and philosophy of dive watches, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.